I have had the Pixel 9 Pro Fold for about a week now, and it's time to give my full thoughts in this review. It is going to be dense. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it and start off talking about the hardware. So let's start with the very first thing that you see, and that is this cover display. It is a 6.3-inch 1080p panel, 422 pixels per inch. It is supposed to hit 2700 nits of peak brightness. We'll talk a bit more about overall brightness here in just a little bit, but I do find that it is absolutely sufficient outdoors, and it is noticeably brighter than the original Pixel Fold, which did struggle a little bit with brightness at times. Like I mentioned in another video, I don't really love the way that this phone looks straight on. I do find this sort of hinge area to the left to be a little bit exaggerated. In particular, coming from the OnePlus Open, which for that phone, that space is so much smaller. The screen gets so much closer to the edge. It does look a little bit dated. This is certainly not some sort of a deal breaker thing. In another video where I talked about how I think this is kind of an ugly phone, someone asked me if that meant I was going to be returning it. No, of course it doesn't. The appearance of the device is not like a super serious thing for me, but it is a device that I don't think looks particularly good. I will say, I think that the fingerprint scanner on that power button is a little bit higher than I would like, but it is still relatively easy to reach. The volume rocker is down below that, and the fingerprint scanner I have found to be pretty darn fast and accurate. I don't really recall how often, often having issues where it's not reading my fingerprint very quickly or having errors at all. I do also love that there is face unlock, which I find to be very fast and accurate, and also works authenticating in banking apps, which I think is such a great feature. As you can see there, I'm not going to let that actually load and show you my bank accounts, but it does work for that, and that's awesome. Of course, this thing is extremely thin, not even 11 millimeters thick when fully closed. Very, very impressive, although that camera bump does protrude from the back pretty darn far, so that does kind of detract from that a little bit, and that camera bump is absolutely massive. I guess one good thing is it doesn't really rock on a table too much because of how big that camera bump is. You do have stereo speakers. One is there and the other one is here, and you may have noticed that those are actually on different sides, so it will be there and there. And the cool thing about that is that means you get stereo sound no matter how the device is oriented. So we're left, right here, we're left, right here. That is, I think, quite smart. Since we've opened the thing up, we do have this 8-inch foldable display, which the resolution is quite strange, as you would expect. 2076 by 2152, 373 pixels per inch, and it is also supposed to hit 27 nits of peak brightness. Now, this screen is not quite as matte as the OnePlus Open screen, but I do find that it is more matte, less glossy, maybe would be a better way to put it, because none of them are really matte. It is less glossy, slightly less glossy than the original Pixel Fold, and I have noticed, maybe this is just anecdotal, maybe this is just me, but it seems like it does a better job at not picking up fingerprints. Most of these foldable devices, they're absolute fingerprint magnets, and this one is too, but it's not as bad as I have seen on other devices like the original Pixel Fold. I'm not going to spend much time on the bezels because, frankly, I think it's just a conversation that is often really overblown, but I do, again, like that there is a little bit of bezel there, because I do find myself occasionally holding this phone in something like this position, and that gives me a little bit of space to hold on to it without actually touching the screen. If we go and look at that front display, you can see what kind of bezel we're looking at there. Definitely not the smallest in the world, and I would say that, look, would I like for this area to be shrunk a little bit? Sure, I probably would, but at the same time, this space being larger means that when you open it, the device itself is wider, which I do appreciate, and the cover display is essentially just a Pixel 9, which means that when you open it, you basically have two Pixel 9s side by side. I guess technically a little bit wider than two Pixel 9s side by side, and I find that to be a pretty decent balance. I said we talk about screen brightness a bit more directly here in just a second, and we have moved outside. As you can see here, we are maxed out on both of these. Automatic brightness is engaged on both of these. The Pixel 9 Pro Fold should be brighter than my Galaxy Z Fold 6, But in the real world, I just don't see that being the case. This is probably very hard to see the difference between them, through the camera like this, but to my eye, the Z Fold 6 does look brighter. If we open them both up, again, this is going to be hard to depict with a camera, hard for you to see the difference, but again, to my eye, in real life, the Z Fold 6 still looks like the brighter screen. It's not a colossal difference, but it is a difference. And again, this is supposed to be brighter, and it just isn't. One screen issue I've actually noticed on this device, probably fairly niche, I'm surprised no one else has talked about this, at least not that I've seen, something that has bugged me a little bit. When you're in an application like Feedly, which is white on straight black, on the cover display specifically, and the brightness is turned all the way down. This is going to be hard to capture. I'm going to show you a better version of this here in just a second. When you're scrolling, the white text ends up looking strangely purple. I'm probably showing you the video of that now in some very dark light, and I think I actually compared this to another phone to show you that that was not the case on the old Pixel Fold. Again, black on white text, brightness turned all the way down, only on the cover display. Just weird that that text takes on a purple look. It's probably not going to bother you too often, but for me, laying in bed sometimes, reading through news stories, looking at what I need to talk about today, it's been a little bit annoying, kind of strange. We'll talk about the Hinge again here quickly. This is another thing that I've talked about several times already, but for the sake of being complete in this review, the Hinge I think feels pretty good. When you start to open it, the magnets are pretty darn strong. This thing's not going to fly open on its own. You have to try to open it, but then you'll kind of feel it release here. There's not a lot of pressure, not a lot of tension at this point, but about right there, there's quite a bit of tension, and it requires a lot of force, and it is very smooth all the way through until about right here where it almost snaps open, very similar to the OnePlus Open. And as you can see here, it is snapping open to be very, very flat. Now, of course, the crease is still the crease. It looks very similar to the original Pixel Fold, very similar to the Z Fold 6, and definitely worse than the OnePlus Open. But the Hinge, just for the simple fact that it does snap flat open, seems to be improved over the original model. And I would just say that in general, the build quality of this device is something that feels like it has been improved fairly dramatically. Everything about it does feel very, very solid. It's not as light as the Open or the Z Fold 6. What is it, 10 or 20 grams heavier, something like that? But it does feel very solid and well built in the hand. I don't think you're going to have any real problems with the build quality of this device. For a speaker test, we grabbed CrabWave. Everybody asks, why do people use CrabWave? Because it's not going to get my video a copyright strike. They're not going to make me mute the audio. It is music that I can play. It's dynamic and it is loud. So we've got the volume boosted all the way on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. We're going to hit play to let you hear how that sounds. And now we're going to come over here to the OnePlus Open, which has maybe the best speakers of any phone I have in the house. We're going to do the exact same thing, maximum volume. I don't feel like I should have to say a whole lot. The OnePlus Open speakers are significantly louder. And I think clarity, distortion, all this stuff is very similar, but maybe a bit more bass. Overall, though, the OnePlus Open speakers are just way, way louder than the Pixel 9 Pro Fold speakers. It's kind of a big loss for me. I really do miss the speakers in this phone when I'm using this phone. So let's pivot and talk about performance, and I just want to get this out of the way first. I'm not going to do a lot of benchmarking, and I'm not going to talk a lot about benchmarks, but I will show you this 3D Mark test because it's going to kind of allow me to move into discussion of another point a bit more easily. This is the Wildlife Extreme test, and basically what this is going to be doing is it's going to run this fairly graphically intense test over and over through 20 loops, and that's going to give us some really good data. As you can see here, all three of these scores are different, with the Z Fold 6 having the best score, the OnePlus Open is in second place, and the Pixel Fold is in a fairly distant third place. No big shock here. that is exactly what you would expect to see. But if we dig in, there is some interesting information here. The first thing I want to point out to you is that the stability for the OnePlus Open is actually the highest, with the Z Fold 6 actually having the most unstable performance. And if we scroll down and look at temperature and battery, these are also very important. So temperature, we started at 28 degrees Celsius and we peaked at 41 degrees Celsius. That is almost identical to the OnePlus Open, and it is slightly worse than the Z Fold 6 that actually only peaked at 39 degrees. But I really want to come back to this. The same temperature as the OnePlus Open. We all know that the Tensor is meant to get very hot. That is the thing we always hear about it. And in this instance, it is no hotter than the OnePlus Open. To go a step further, from 58% battery down to 47% battery. That means we lost 11% of our battery running this test. For the OnePlus Open, we went from 37% down to 23%. That is what, say 14% of the battery. That is a larger battery drain than the Tensor G4. And it's right in line with what the Z Fold 6 had, which was a 10% battery loss. So again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's scoring well in these gaming benchmarks, but what I will tell you is in terms of thermals and in terms of battery draw, it is in line with the latest Z Fold 6, the latest Qualcomm Snapdragon processor. Let's pause for a moment on the idea of performance and talk about how this phone has been to actually use over the last week. To put things very briefly before I go even deeper, it's been absolutely fine. I have not felt this device stutter or lag or do anything particularly strange. I think my lone bug was this weird thing that happened when I was in my car and I unlocked it when it was in tablet mode and the unlock animation played in like super slow motion. It was very strange. It was a one-off and nothing like that has happened since. Otherwise, everything that I'm doing on this phone is very, very snappy and consistent. You can see here how fast and smooth this thing is opening up different applications. There's just no real hesitation with this thing at all. And mind you, those are applications I just opened. You saw me open them for the first time, and that's how long they take to actually load in. It's a very, very fast device. I know that people will look at Geekbench scores and things like that, and they will determine that this phone is going to be slow, but it's just not the case. It is a very fast phone, and it's very fast doing the things that I want to do with my phone, which is normal applications, and then of course, things like opening your camera. I mean, look how fast it's actually able to get into the camera. We'll go ahead and close all of this stuff again so that you can see this for the first time. You go from no camera to camera on and ready to snap a photo remarkably fast. And that is something that is really important to me, and I think important to a lot of people. Now, of course, if you fire this thing up and your intention is to process, high bitrate 4K video or play some of the latest and greatest highly graphically intensive games, yeah, it's going to be a little bit worse at that than something like the Z Fold 6 or something using the latest Snapdragon processor. But you have to decide how important that is to you, kind of weigh the balance out, because I'm telling you flat out, when it comes to normal everyday stuff, this thing is extremely snappy. You're not going to have problems with it being slow. And because of the improvements that they have made to the modem, to the Tensor processor, and with that vapor chamber, it does feel like those thermal problems have been largely improved upon to a pretty good degree. The only place where I feel like I can see an area where the Pixel 9 Pro Fold still needs to improve in terms of thermal is with keeping the screen brightness at its maximum for long periods of time. We already talked about how it's not quite as bright as the Z Fold 6, at least to my eyes. One other issue I was able to kind of isolate by having these devices set out on a table in direct sunlight, and you can see that the Pixel 9 Pro Fold actually does dim where the Z Fold 6 for 10 straight minutes is able to keep its brightness cranked all the way up. Now, all four of these phones were blazingly hot by the time this test was done. Nonetheless, the Z Fold did not dim, and the Pixel did. Kind of tangentially to this performance topic is going to be the battery performance. And what I've seen so far from the Pixel 9 Pro Fold has been pretty darn encouraging. The original Pixel Fold was normally going to get me 4 or 5 hours of screen on time in a day. And if I unplugged it, 7 o'clock in the morning, something like that. By the time I'm going to bed around 9, it is on fumes at that point if I didn't drop it on my Pixel stand and sort of charge it throughout the day. With the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, I am getting basically the same usage because I use my phone the same way regardless. But at the end of the day, I'm ending with something like 30% or so left on my battery. I've had days where I have actually been in the 6 or 7 hours of screen on time without charging, which is pretty impressive. You can see where I posted this here. I unplugged at 7 a.m. I had 2/3 of my battery still remaining. I think I was literally at 66%, and I'd already had almost 3 hours of screen on time. Very, very impressive. Now, the charging speed itself, not particularly impressive. It does charge at 21 watts. However, I will tell you that it seems to charge faster than the original Pixel Fold, and that's because the thermals are improved. The original Pixel Fold was also meant to charge at 21 watts, but it didn't, okay? It just didn't. It charged at like 15 watts most of the time. This thing actually seems to stick at 21 watts, and because of that, it does top off a little bit faster. Can't give them a pass on how slow that charging rate is, but it definitely is improved. And the battery life, for me, has been right there with the Z Fold 6 and right there with the OnePlus Open. No complaints at all. All right, let's talk about the software experience. And this is one of these places where I'm just going to straight up explain to you what I like about these phones, what my biases are, and you can just sort of understand from there. I know a lot of you love your OnePlus Open, you love your Z Fold or whatever other foldable might be that gives you more flexibility in terms of multitasking. And I totally appreciate that, and I get it. I do like the open canvas particularly quite a lot. But the reality is, for me, I do one app side by side with another app, so 2 apps open primarily 99% of the time. The frequency with which I open a third app is maybe a couple of times a month when it is an option to me. So with the Pixel Fold, and I'll just show you, we'll open up the Play Store and you have the taskbar down here at the bottom. We're just going to grab YouTube and drag it up there. That is the limit of what you are actually able to do in terms of multitasking. You can't have a third app and you can't have a floating window. Now, I will tell you, the floating window thing does bug me. I do 100% want a floating window. And yes, I absolutely know you can enable some things in developer options and it's not good. It doesn't work the same way. I want a true floating window option. So put that aside. That is a big criticism for me as well. But for me, these 2 applications, you can switch them back and forth, and that's fine. You can save an app pair, as you can see down here at the bottom. That's really all that I need, and so we got to get that out of the way, okay? Because I'm not going to be really hammering Google for not having more flexibility than this, because this is all I use anyways, and so I'm fine with it. This doesn't bother me at all. I get that it might bother you, so I'm just getting this part out of the way. All that being said, I really, really like the Pixel experience on these phones, okay? I know some people love One UI. I don't think that many people have Color OS or Oxygen OS as their number one, but for me, Pixels are far and away my number one. I just like the way that they look, the way that they feel. They have character. They have this sort of homey vibe to them. And the features that are added on top of these devices are more so than any other OEM's version of Android. They are features that I do use. One of the ones I feel like everybody immediately goes to is call screening. You can see I have mine set to maximum protection. Spam calls are just not a thing I deal with at all on my Pixel 9 Pro Fold or on any Pixel device, and that is amazing. And of course, they have also added things like call notes, which allow you to record and transcribe your phone calls, even summarized on device. It just gets more and more useful. This may be a little bit surprising, but one of the features I miss the most when I'm not using a Pixel device is here in Gboard. It's called Assistant Typing. I can click on this microphone button and just talk extremely naturally, period. I have the automatic punctuation feature disabled because it often kind of makes mistakes for me, but it's easy enough for me to just add the punctuation in. And what really sets this particular dictation software apart is the fact that I can do this. And then just continue talking and it will pick up right where I left off, period. And then after that, if you feel like maybe you've made some mistakes, you can click on the proofread button and it's going to go through this and it's going to add punctuation, capitalization, it's going to spell check, grammar check, all of that good stuff and give you several different options to quickly correct any error that you might have made. It's really good. What about now playing? I absolutely love the fact that at any moment I hear a song, I'm out in a store somewhere, whatever it might be, and there's a song playing, I can simply look at my phone and it's going to be able to tell me what that song was, and it's going to keep a list of the songs you have heard, the songs this phone have been around. I love this feature. And I also love the little touches that Pixels have. The fact that in your recent screen, you can quickly take a screenshot of just that one application or even select text inside an application as well, right there inside your recents menu. Another way you can also kind of do the same thing is with circle to search. I know that other phones are beginning to get circle to search now, but this phone is going to have it as well. And when new features come out inside circle to search, it's going to be among the first to get those new features. And speaking of new features, we have things like Pixel Studio. Is this something that I use every day? Absolutely not. But is it something that I have occasionally used to generate an image to maybe punctuate a joke in a text message? Yeah, definitely. And it is shockingly fast. Because this is happening on device, this generation, this image creation is happening on the device, look how fast that actually works. And of course, you can add stickers and text with different fonts, slap that stuff on there, and when you're done, if you are split screening, you can literally drag that image into your text messaging app or simply copy it, send it off, and impress everyone with how quickly you are able to generate that image. Now, another app that I'm not using nearly as much as I was hoping is Pixel Screenshots. And it comes down to how this application actually works. When you take a screenshot, it's going to scan that screenshot on device and it's going to give you basically a searchable summary of that screenshot. You can add notes to it, you can add it to collections to organize them, and it basically becomes highly searchable. And this all happens on device. The problem is, all of my other screenshots historically are stored in the cloud through Google Photos. In fact, I do not keep virtually any photos or videos directly on my device. I use the Google Photos free up space option and I delete them. So in order to take advantage of this feature, I would have to manually re-download all of my year's worth of screenshots and keep them specifically on this device, but then still use Google Photos to keep the other photos and videos in the cloud. And personally, I just find this to be a little bit awkward that I'm keeping some things on my phone and other things not. I haven't found a good way to sort of organize this. I guess I could keep my screenshots in that specific folder and then have Google Photos ignore them and not back them up, but I kind of want them backed up as well, so it's kind of a catch-22 with this app. Another feature that I'm just not finding to be all that useful is a new feature of Gemini called Gemini Live. What are some things I can use Gemini Live for?
Gemini Live can help with a bunch of things. You can ask it questions about just about anything, from sports scores to science facts.
Is it true that I can just interrupt you and ask another question at any time?
Yeah, you can interrupt me whenever you want. Just say something, and I'll drop what I'm doing to answer your new question. Go ahead.
I mean, it does what it's supposed to do, and it does it quickly, and it does it well. I just don't know who this is for, because I can just as easily fire up Gemini and ask it a question, and if I have a follow-up question, click the microphone and do the same thing. It just seems weird to advertise this as like a major feature, because it's just the thing we already have without having to press the microphone button. Of course, we also have the new addition to Magic Editor, which is called Reimagine. And this does allow you to do some pretty impressive stuff. Now, again, some of this is going to be potentially useful. Some of it is absolutely ridiculous and does not work well at all. What we're going to try to do first here is I'm just selecting everything around my dog. And you're going to see this happen in real time. We're going to click on Reimagine, and I'm going to say a field full of beautiful flowers. And it's going to try to replace everything it just selected with a field full of beautiful flowers. You can say whatever you want it to be, type it out, and it's going to use generative AI to try and make that. And in this instance, there you go. There's my dog standing in a field full of flowers. And if I posted that, you know, there's a chance that nobody would be any the wiser. It's fairly convincing, actually. But I've also run into circumstances where it has done very, very strange things. And we're going to see if we can get it to do some of these strange things. So we're going to select the area right above her head. And I'm going to try to put a top hat on my dog. And hopefully this does what it was doing with another photo of a dog trying to put a hat on it. It does some really weird stuff. In this instance, we're beautiful. It absolutely crushed it. Every single photo. Well, okay, so this one, I don't know what exactly is going on there. Let me show you the screenshots of the other time, though. So on this one, it created a weird little dog face coming out of the couch behind the dog and put a hat on that. Very creepy. Here it created, I think that's a piece of toast with a small dog in some sort of a hat as well. Just very, very strange images. This time it put a hat in the middle of its forehead. So it's inconsistent, and it has been inconsistent for me. Of course, there is the other issue that I'm sure you're seeing all over the internet, people using it for nefarious purposes. I'm sure you can think of all these different ways that you could create an edit on one of your photos to convince people that something has happened that absolutely has not happened. Here is my dog being stalked by a mountain lion with a broken neck. That's not necessarily the most realistic one. There's a very tiny mountain lion. I don't think she's in much danger with that mountain lion. That one's not too bad. I think the first one is fairly decent and fairly convincing, actually. The scale is still not quite right. But I'm sure you've seen these news articles of people creating car wrecks and all these crazy things. You can absolutely do stuff like that with Magic Editor and Reimagine. You shouldn't. I think that this is one of these instances. Actually, I reposted something that someone said on Threads earlier. They said, the Agita over Pixel's Reimagine feature boils down to, oh my god, this digital tool does terrible things when I tell it to do terrible things. Do I have that right? Have you tried not doing that? And I kind of do agree with that to some degree, but it's also one of these things where it's a very powerful tool, and giving a very powerful tool to everyone is bound to lead to bad results. So that's something to definitely consider. But for me, I find it to be one of these features that I'm probably going to use very sparingly here and there to just do sort of fun parlor tricks with. How long is it going to be interesting to me remains to be seen. Even though the Pixel 9 features aren't as much of a home run for me as I was hoping that they would be, they're not things I'm going to use every day, I still really love the Pixel experience, and it is, to me, absolutely at its best on this device, because it is a very solid, like, flagship level phone on this cover display, and then it is a gigantic tablet on this inner display. And I was concerned that it would not be wide enough for me to be comfortable multitasking, but it is. It's such a large screen that you basically have two slightly wider than normal phone screens on the inside, so I am absolutely okay with that. And the fact that it is taller than it is wide, my biggest concern there was that lots of applications that I use would not adopt their tablet layout when you were using them, and that is something that by and large seems to be okay. Google has fixed this problem with many of their apps. As you can see here, we do have our tablet layout just the same, and most applications that I use are like this. There are a few that are not, like Gmail. For some reason, Gmail just gives you the phone layout stretched out. Hopefully that's something that gets adjusted later on, but it's, by and large, we're fine. It's absolutely fine. I still do wish that they stuck with the wider than it is tall aspect ratio, but since this is such a large screen and it is wider than even the OnePlus Open, I can make do with it. And for me, this does feel like the ultimate Pixel experience device. Maybe the most surprising thing for me about the Pixel 9 Pro Fold is how good the camera actually is, with most of the hardware either staying the same or sensors actually getting smaller. They were newer sensors, but physically smaller. I think most of us expected things to remain basically identical to the original Pixel Fold, but that is just not the case in reality. If you want to see a really deep dive into the camera, I have posted videos comparing it directly to the original Pixel Fold, comparing it to the OnePlus Open, and comparing it to the Z Fold 6, so tons of samples in those videos, but for this, we'll just quickly talk through it. The main sensor does to me look a little bit warmer than it used to, which is a good thing. We also do seem to have a little bit more detail than before. The telephoto, in particular, at extreme zoom, looks noticeably better than it did on the original Pixel Fold. Much, much more detail than before, and the ultra-wide is a wider field of view than it was in the past. Still probably the weakest sensor on this phone, but it's definitely no slouch at this point. For me, when it comes down to the Fold 6, the OnePlus Open, and the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, what camera system am I taking? It's the Pixel. It is the most consistent camera system of the three, and while it might not reach the same heights as the OnePlus Open, it is probably 80% of the way there, but also has the ability to be extremely trustworthy. You pull it out, you snap the picture, and you know that it's going to be good, and that is just not the case with OnePlus or the Samsung phone to some degree either. In particular, when you get into low light, the Pixel really, really stands out. It is the camera system to beat at this point, and that is very surprising to me. I do want to quickly mention a couple of camera features that I do think stand out. While the reimagined part of Magic Editor might be a little bit overblown, the other stuff about it is still absolutely top-notch. The ability to remove things from a photo in a really natural way absolutely does come in handy. I talked about this a long time ago, but Zoom Enhance is here on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. That's cool. Unfortunately, it's not that useful. It really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. So if you're excited about Zoom Enhance, I would say temper those expectations just a little bit. But Video Boost is also a thing that is finally here on the Fold. And I will just tell you that when you're filming in sort of subpar lighting conditions, Video Boost can make a tremendous difference to the overall detail of your video. Video, of course, being a place where I feel like this device still does lag behind devices like the Z Fold and OnePlus Open just a little bit. You're going to want to turn on Video Boost if the conditions are subpar. It's really going to help. One more feature that I just have to mention that I almost forgot about is the ability to reframe shots inside Magic Editor. I took this photo of a bumblebee and I was able to use it to zoom the photo out. So it added all of this additional detail that was not there in the photo. Can you see where the line was, where it started generating stuff? I can't. I don't think you can either. Incredibly useful feature. To kind of wrap this thing up, I have mixed feelings about this phone. In a lot of ways, it is the folding phone to beat right now. But for me specifically, I have this thing where I like phones that are weird, that are different, that are exciting. And the Pixel 9 Pro Fold is just none of those things. It is another folding phone in the same exact form factor. Now, granted, it's a good one. It's thin, it's lighter, it has the best camera, and it has the Pixel software experience that I absolutely love. And because of that, it will probably be my daily driver going forward. But it's also boring. It doesn't have the exciting, novel form factor of the original. It's not doing anything interesting to me. If you're a wrestling fan, it's John Cena. It's very, very good, but it's very, very boring. We've seen it. We maybe wanted something new, something original, and instead we got John Cena. Nothing wrong with John Cena. He's great, but he's just not exciting anymore. So guys, that was a lot. That was extremely dense, and I could probably go for another 15 minutes, and I probably will go for much longer than that in other videos where I cover specific topics. But for my overall thoughts on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, that is where we are. Thanks for watching. If you made it through all of this, double thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.